Hey guys, Dan Trivedi here. I hope you're all well. As ever, don't forget to do me a huge favour and smash the like button, and don't forget to hit subscribe. So I've got a different video and a really special one, an interview with my good friend Nicole Bremner, who is well known in the property circle and has huge experience right through from single houses, homes in London, right through to large developments and commercial conversions and crowdfunding and various things. I won't steal Nicole's thunder. So we thought we would do a question and answer for my YouTube channel, and in return, I'm going to be doing a podcast for Nicole's channel. So you're going to kind of get it from two sides and two angles on here. But without sort of further ado, really, I'll introduce Nicole. And Nicole, maybe you could just tell people a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me down on your YouTube channel. I've enjoyed watching you over the past few months. So I started off in banking many years ago now, moved to the UK in 2000, worked in banking with a sort of moderate success. And then I moved to the US, moved to New York in 2007, had my first child in 2008, went back to work in banking at Goldman Sachs, and Lehman Brothers failed on my first day of work. So it was clear that my banking career was not going to move ahead. So came back to the UK, had a second baby quite quickly, and then quite soon after that was not sure what I wanted to do with my life. So I renovated a flat, really enjoyed that process, then found a rundown, dilapidated vicarage and in Hackney, renovated that, really loved the process. And it was then that my partner at the time said, look, you've really done well at this property. You really enjoyed it. You get along with your builder after 2 builds. Why don't you keep doing this? And so that's when I did. And I started, and that was in 2009, started buying what I now know are called HMOs. I didn't realize at the time, I thought they were bed sits, but I used to buy up HMOs in Hackney and convert them into luxury family homes. And so since then, I've just continued, and now we've got, I think, 106 units for sale right now across London, over 9 projects. So quite a bit going on.
Wow, that's great. Well, thanks for giving us the intro there, Nicole. And obviously you and I have known each other a good sort of 3 or 4 years now, and we met through property, but we sort of definitely built our friendship through the crowdfunding platform. And you've had huge amounts of success in raising a lot of money really, really quickly. And what will be really interesting to hear about in this interview will be the successes and how you're able to do it, and then what the reality is of those projects post the raise, and then also where you think the current market is versus maybe historic crashes or shifts and things like that, and then where you potentially see the opportunity. So what we'll do, Nicole, is we'll go straight into it, and I'll fire my first question at you, if that's okay. Let's start with your profile, and which is great and massive, and you've released a book. I went to your book launch, which was fantastic. You've got various social media platforms with some huge numbers in terms of followers, and obviously the crowdfunding. So what definitely stands out to me was when you did your first few crowdfunding raises, and you raised literally hundreds of thousands of pounds within minutes. Just talk us through the behind the scenes build up to that, and what looked like a really quick bit of success. What thought process and what workload went into that?
Yeah, sure. No, first of all, a little story, Dan. I don't know if I've told you this before, but yeah, you and your lovely wife Charlotte came to my book launch, which was really great. And you came carrying this little Chanel shopping bag, and I thought, oh, he's bought me a present. And then you took the Chanel shopping bag with you because you'd bought Charlotte a present, obviously not me.
Yeah, so. I'm afraid so. Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, it wasn't a present, but one can live in hope, can't they? But yeah, no, I wrote a book, and we did have some success in crowdfunding. It feels like so many years ago. That was in 2016, 17, and it really did come down to profile and building up that personal brand. And when they say that it takes 7 touch points for people to trust you enough to purchase from you. And when you're speaking at events, you've got a book, you've got a social media profile, all these things are touch points, and all these things mean that people build up a relationship or some trust with you. And that really is the reason why we're able to raise. We raised 6.43 million from the crowd in total, and one of those was in minutes. I can't remember. I think it was 11 minutes or something like that, of 17 minutes that we raised 1.4 million. again, it's a bit rusty now, but it was a lot of money and it was very quick. But it really did come down to profile and building a profile that people wanted to be part of.
Yeah, thank you for that. So what looked like 11 minutes was actually, there was a huge amount of effort behind the scenes with you and your team, and loads of different touch points, not just social media, which is really interesting to hear. And I'm a big fan of social media, and I think it's a great way to get yourself out there in virtual network. And obviously the proof in the pudding is in the eating with the results that you had so quickly. So great work on that, and massive well done. So you say 2017, so we're sort of 2-3 years after that. So how is raising funds through crowdfunding on projects which are, large development projects, how is that panning out in terms of the relationship with, say, a large group of investors versus one or even a standard lender?
It's really difficult, and I won't lie, it is very challenging. First of all, when you are dealing with so many people, you have to be meticulously organized and just on. And I think if I'm to hold up my hand with any issues where I'm not quite, my strengths or my weaknesses rather, it's that communication with such a vast number of investors. And I did have a full-time investor relations manager, Jane Scroggs, who did an excellent job. She then left to move abroad, and it was a very challenging position to then take over, especially when things didn't necessarily go to plan. And I think crowdfunding is fantastic when everything's going to plan. And I invested in one of yours, Dan, and made some money, which is great. But when things are not going to plan, that is when it becomes really problematic, because not only do you have one or two investors who might be disgruntled, you've got a whole crowd of investors. And it's that crowd mentality. When one is unhappy, a lot of them are unhappy. Since 2017, just turning to the markets briefly, we've had this perfect storm of Brexit, stamp duty changes, and Section 24, I forget all my sections, but the changes in tax on landlords. So we've had all these three factors that the government, apart from Brexit, but the other two, the government put through in order to cool an overheated housing market. That was their intention. It definitely worked. The market, especially the high-end market, just collapsed, as we all know. Then add to that some other issues within the projects, and probably taking on far too many than our construction team could handle has just created huge amounts of problems. And we're still slowly getting our way out of those and selling on these units, and all except we've got an 18 unit scheme that we're just started the groundworks on now. But apart from that, everything is pretty much finished now and on the market, ready to sell or is being sold. I think the takeaway from crowdfunding is that it is an incredible tool for people to raise equity, particularly when they may not have it. It's another tool within their arsenal, but it does come at a risk. And that risk is, if anything goes wrong, you will have the wrath of all those investors and perhaps the disquiet of all those investors too. And that's very difficult to deal with unless you've got a really solid process and team in place to do that.
Thanks for sharing that, Nicole, and thanks for being so transparent and honest. I think anyone watching this who has either previously invested in crowdfunding or is maybe considering it, that is a really good picture of the realities of raising funds. It's also equally really nice to hear that even though the projects are a few years down the line and there's been some huge hurdles put in place against the market that you are playing in, you're dug in the trenches, seeing those projects through, and doing the right thing by the project regardless of what other hurdles are coming out. So hats off to you, and that's a great result. Do you think, because there's been some other crowdfunding developments which I've seen on the platform that you and I have used, and I've seen them on other platforms, which have come in and raised funds, but they've gone completely at the waistline, and those projects have been called in by the receivers, the developers disappeared off social media completely. But there's been less media or less attention on that because the individual definitely wasn't as high profile as, say, some of the other people. So do you think that even though your social media influence and reach to so many different people helped raise funds, do you think that's maybe brought some unwarranted attention as well, given the state of the market?
Absolutely. And anything to do with building your brand is a double-edged sword, as you've rightly put. It's easy to raise money when you've got a profile, but it's also easy to be a whipping boy for any disgruntled investors if you've got a profile. And I just remember one specific example. I was over with an estate agent, giving an estate agent a tour of one of our properties, and the carpenter happened to be there. And the carpenter came up to me and said, "If you don't pay my invoice, I'm going to put all over social media that you haven't paid me." And I said, "Excuse me, I've been working with you for years on my own projects. You know I'm not responsible for paying. Why would you do that? That's not a very professional way. All you have to do is come to me, not in front of this agent, but do it through the right channels, and I'll see what I can do. But this is the first I've heard of it." And people do use that to hold you ransom. Well, you've got a big, I'm going to tell everyone on social media what you've done. Well, let's be professional about this, and let's have a look at the facts, and let's not let emotion get away with us. And let's face it, investments come with risk, and property is, regardless of what anyone says, a high risk investment. So it is up to the investors to make their own decisions as to whether or not this investment is the right investment for them, has the right investment profile. And ultimately, that's their responsibility. We can't blame others for perhaps not even reading the contracts, because a lot of times people have not even read the shareholders agreement. They've just said, well, we trust this person, we're going to invest and we're going to sign. That is not the actions of a sophisticated investor. A sophisticated investor should go away, do their own research, and truly understand what they're investing in and also what they're signing.
I think that's a really good message. Kind of comes in nicely as well to the legislation that was announced, I think it was last week, that it's going to be an all-outright ban on advertising crowdfunding type projects to retail investors. And I'm sure the reasons behind that is because a lot of retail investors have invested based on emotion, based on public persona, into some projects, into some other individuals that maybe didn't stack up and have now gone and fallen by the wayside. And obviously you've experienced some issues with regards to the current market, but again, hats off to you for sticking in the trenches and seeing it through. And I guess just the last point on crowdfunding, stepping back for a second then. So would you say that projects where you can get in and out relatively quickly, maybe a little bit smaller, maybe 6 to 12 month turnarounds, are maybe where someone should start to really test the water in terms of these types of things? Or do you think a lower risk, longer period, 3 or 4 years, would be better for someone to park their money and then just forget about it? What do you think?
I think that it comes down to percentage of your net worth. Now, I qualified as a financial advisor in Australia, but I'm not qualified to give advice here. But if you were to go and see an IFA or a financial advisor, they would look at your net worth and say, okay, well, if you want to invest in some high risk investments, maybe based on your age and other income factors, etc., they might recommend that up to 10% of your net worth be used for these sorts of high risk. And I would say that that's a fairly good rule of thumb. If you are investing any more than that, then it's very high risk, and it doesn't come without the warranted risks. So rather than looking at the investment type, I would look at your total wealth. And if you're worth, say, 100,000, just maybe play around with 10,000. And something like the one that you had up on the crowdfunding platform, it was a planning gain. It was relatively small, put £1,000 in, got more back. Things like that are really, they're probably a better one for people just to dabble in if they've not got huge amounts of money. Otherwise, just have a really good long-term view of the investment and treat it as a high-risk investment.
Cool. Okay, let's move off crowdfunding for a second. But thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that will be really, really interested in what you've had to say. So we've just gone through what I believe is the biggest turmoil in the market, and not just the property market, in my lifetime. And there's so many different views about, did the market collapse and now it's on the road to recovery, or did it just stall and now it's on its way to what is going to be a huge crash? I mean, from your point of view, not just in London and your market, but overall, what do you think has happened and is going to happen?
I think what happened is more of a stall, and it seemed that London really overheated and there was just so much hype. I remember I'm sure you did too, the sort of 2012 onward, that period between 2012 2017 was so overheated, and London got really, really hot, and then it spread out throughout the rest of the country. And then what happened is London stalled completely and even started going backwards, and then the other areas, so Birmingham, then started to stall and go backwards, and all the other areas, it rippled out, and it is always a ripple effect. And it has been, I've even now got properties that I've just had valued, and they're lower than their valuations in 2017. They're what, 15, 20% lower? Is that a crash? It could be classed as a crash. It's quite significant in valuation terms. So it has been, it's tough. It is really, really tough. And I think that anyone that was in property from 2008, 9, 10, if you survived that period and then you were able to sit through that rally, you made money. But now I think there's a shift and towards more normalized returns, which are mid single digits through to maybe 11-12% returns if you're lucky. But I can't see property, at least for the near future, recovering anywhere near the levels of the 40-50% returns that we were achieving back in the early part of 2010 onwards.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, and you say, 20%, is it a crash? Most people would say an adjustment of 5 to 8% would be considered a crash over a sustained period of time. Yeah, that one is up for debate. So if people are watching this, Nicole, and they're thinking, well, I'm thinking about investing in a crowdfunding platform, but you know what? I want to jump in with 2 feet and get stuck in myself, but I don't really know what geographical area to look at. I don't really know what market I want to play in. I don't even know if I want to buy and sell or buy and hold. What would you say to someone who's maybe starting out with a very little amount of cash? What would be a good way for them to enter the property market?
Crowdfunding is a good way to enter the market in that way, because you can buy a portion of a property or a fraction of a property, not the whole property, and you can then learn along with the project. So I still remain evangelical about crowdfunding as an investment tool. As far as geography, I still believe that the best place to buy is an area, either an area you grew up or your family is still there, or an area that you live. You and I are perfect examples of this. You know the Norwich, Norfolk area so well. It's where you were born and raised and still live. For me, it's Hackney in East London. I know that so well. I'm in Kent now, so I'm starting to learn the various areas around here. But still, it's going to take, I lived in Hackney for a good 10 years. It's going to take me that long to learn this area down here. So I still think that in your own backyard is the best, because you walk those areas, you drive those areas, you really get to know what's going on in those areas. You also know about any large developments that are going on, or any infrastructure plans for the local authorities. You get to know about that, where it's much harder if you're not resident within an area, or at least from an area, to find out those sorts of things. So as for where, I think your own backyard, or where you grew up, where you still have ties. As for crowdfunding, I do think it's a legitimate way of investing and getting to know property. So I've got my curtains blowing into me. I've got that wind blown effect. It's lovely, given it's 31 degrees.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Nicole. I think that's really insightful, and I share your view. Do it in your own geographical location, because when things do go wrong, there's nothing like being just around the corner to be able to go and visit and touch and feel the problem, as opposed to being 30, 40, if not 50, 100 miles away. So great bit of advice there, and thanks for sharing. So if we just finish now, Nicole, on what you are doing right now in this current market. You've moved to Kent, and what you're going to be doing moving forward as well.
Yeah, I never thought I'd leave London, especially East London. It's I really felt like I was part of East London, and so to leave that area, just sorry, the curtains flapping in the breeze. Yeah, to leave that area was really difficult for me. I did it ultimately for my children and schools. They all got into one school, which is such a relief, one school right through to A levels if they choose to do that. So as for what I'm doing property wise, still completing the construction of a number of units. We've also got a number that are for sale. So just overseeing that whole process, overseeing the management of the crowdfunding shareholders and their various exit strategies from those 6 projects. So they're quite a lot. I'm in 9 projects altogether, 6 of which are crowdfunded. So just working on those exits, working quite heavily on the staging of one particular project on City Road, which is a really beautiful penthouse development on top of the building. And then I've got some other really interesting things that I'm working on at the moment as well. A lot of consulting projects. FTSE 100 company, are you able to come on board and be our property consultant on that? So that's exciting. Haven't signed on anything yet, so can't say any more about that. Doing a lot more of podcasting because that is something I really enjoy. Because I think when you go through a difficult period in your life, and I certainly have both personally and professionally over the last 9 months to a year, it really makes you reassess what's important. And when I looked at my life and thought, right, before I used to be so money focused and everything was about trying to build this huge income and nest egg. And it's not actually about that anymore. And all I need is enough money to get by and enough just to make sure that my kids are really content, not even happy, just content. But what I want to do is just sail around the world with my partner on the boat, and anything that fits in with that strategy, I will look at. Anything that doesn't, I completely don't look at. And so that means being on site, that's not going to happen because I can't do that from the boat. But consulting for properties, on property developments or for property companies, I can do that. Non-executive directorships, I've got one at the moment with Progress, and looking at a couple of others as well. So there's things that I can do very easily from the boat and come back to London every month and do all my in-face meetings then as well. And what this pandemic's really taught people is that you don't have to be physically available. Everything now is being done online, even things like signing loan agreements, which before solicitors insisted on being done in the office. Now it's all being done via DocuSign. So that's a relief that this awful event has forced the industry to step up to this century even and allow us to be much more remote with how we do things. So that's pretty much what I'm doing. Anything that's remote and anything that brings me joy. And if something doesn't bring me joy, I'm just not going to do it. It doesn't fit in with that long-term strategy.
It sounds like you've got a lot on. If you can do it from the edge of a boat in the Mediterranean, it sounds like it will be something that you could look at. But I totally agree with you. You know, the whole thing of having to go and physically sign paperwork, it just seemed to drag the whole property market into the past. And the pandemic or the lockdown has definitely shifted and forced the industry into the 21st century. So hopefully it will make everyone's life a little bit easier when it comes to some of the old-fashioned details of crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Okay, well, look, huge thank you, Nicole. Absolutely fantastic to speak to you again. Thanks for sharing some real in-depth insight into some of the questions around the crowdfunding and the current market and what you're going to be doing in the future. But that's it from me. You can also find me on Nicole's podcast doing a reverse interview. So I wonder what questions she's got for me. We're doing this interview first. But if anyone's got any questions for me or Nicole, just pop them in the comments below and we'll either get the answers in the comments or Nicole and I may do a follow-up interview to answer them, depending on how many we get and what types of questions they are. But that's it from me. Massive thanks again, Nicole. And hope you found the content rich, and I'll catch you all on the next video.
Great. Thank you, Dan.